In an instant, my life was turned upside down. My husband's voice, sharp and unsympathetic, sliced through the phone. "Why do you always fall apart when I need you?" he complained, seemingly oblivious to the urgency that had sent me rushing to the hospital. "Our unborn child's safety hanging by a thread. We're here, hungry, waiting for your terrible cooking, and you're off relaxing in the hospital," he continued, his words lacking any trace of concern. He declared he had had enough and was going to eat out with his parents, leaving me to find my own way home. His anger seeped through the phone, casting blame on me for a situation that was beyond my control, intensifying my fear and worry, especially for the child I was desperate to protect. Once, I thrived as a passionate cosmetic salesperson, known for my dedication and hard work, with a collection of awards and a reputation for excellence. I loved my job and the confidence it instilled in me. Meeting my husband felt like a fairy tale. Our whirlwind romance blossomed into marriage. However, the joy of discovering I was pregnant brought with it a difficult decision to leave my job due to the risk of miscarriage. A choice made with our family's future in mind. As I navigated the challenges of pregnancy, my husband's support dwindled, transforming from excitement into frustration. Simple tasks morphed into monumental challenges, and my efforts to meet his expectations often fell short. "Where's my lunch?" he'd ask, scoffing at the basic sandwiches I managed to prepare, criticizing my sensitivity to smells. "Pregnancy is not an illness," he dismissed, leaving me to fend for myself. This change in his demeanor was a far cry from the man I had fallen in love with. His once-present companionship during doctor's visits faded, as did any empathy for the household chores that now felt insurmountable to me. Our home, once a sanctuary of mutual respect and love, increasingly resembled a battleground, where I fought not just for my well-being but for the safety of our unborn child, clinging to the hope that we could find our way back to understanding and support. I often reminded myself that he might just be exhausted. He had taken on a mentorship role for a newcomer at work, which was demanding. Perhaps that explained his dwindling patience and increasing irritability. I reassured myself that once our baby arrived, his hectic schedule would ease, and we would settle into a rhythm as a family. "It's going to be okay," I whispered to my growing belly, striving to maintain a positive outlook despite the struggles with my changing body and our strained relationship. Yet, the situation between my husband and me continued to deteriorate. To compound the tension, my in-laws began dropping by unannounced, raising my stress levels even higher. They scrutinized the cleanliness of our home and expressed concern about how we would manage once the baby arrived. Despite their criticisms, they expected hospitality and demanded that I prepare something for them to eat on the spot. Caught off guard and unprepared, I felt overwhelmed and criticized for not being a better host. Each visit ended with their disappointment, my husband siding with them and never defending me. No matter how hard I tried, I was left feeling inadequate in their eyes. During one of my in-laws' visits, I was sent out to buy groceries while heavily pregnant and collapsed under the strain. I awoke in the hospital, discovering that I had fainted from overexertion. But thankfully, our baby was still safe. The doctors advised me to stay a few days for rest and observation. As I glanced at my phone, I noticed several missed calls from my husband. I realized he must have been worried when I didn't return from the store. However, when I finally called him back, hoping for a hint of concern or relief, I was met with an angry tirade instead. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his voice harsh and unforgiving, as if my health and the safety of our baby were of no importance to him. I shuddered at the sharpness of his words. "I'm sorry I collapsed at the grocery store and was rushed to the hospital. They have me on 4 fluids and said I need to stay here for a few days." But his response was cold and impatient, making it clear that my well-being mattered less than his inconvenience. "You collapsed, and I'm supposed to care? Why didn't you answer my calls? You're so slow," he snapped, each of his words cut deep, and the thought of our unborn child being exposed to such negativity was unbearable. Please stop yelling. It's not good for the baby, I pleaded. But it was futile. He pressed on, undeterred by my request for kindness. We're starving here, waiting for your terrible cooking, and you're just taking it easy in the hospital. It was evident he intended to dine out with his parents and leave me to fend for myself. Even in my condition, his voice, filled with anger and lacking concern, made me recoil. I couldn't bear to expose my baby to such harshness, so I ended the call, feeling utterly alone and disheartened as I returned to my hospital room. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. It was in this vulnerable moment that a familiar, comforting voice reached out to me. Are you okay? I looked up to see Helen, a customer I had grown close to during my days as a cosmetic salesperson, offering me a towel. Relief and warmth flooded through me as I recognized her. Helen, it's really you. I'm so glad you remember me. Our reunion felt like a twist of fate, a much-needed reminder of kindness and human connection in my darkest hour. Helen had been more than just a customer. She was a woman who, after a difficult divorce, had lost her self-confidence and stopped wearing makeup entirely. I remembered the day I approached her at the cosmetics counter, offering to help her try on some products. The transformation in her appearance was more than physical. It marked a moment of emotional healing for her, a step towards reclaiming her self-esteem. Over time, Helen had become a friend, but suddenly, 5 years before I left my job, she had stopped coming, and I had always wondered what had happened to her. Now, here she was, a beacon of support when I needed it most. I returned hoping to reconnect with you, Helen, I said. To my surprise, she responded. When I visited your previous workplace, I found out you had left, which really took me aback. Her voice was filled with a mix of surprise and disappointment. I'm sorry for dropping in unexpectedly. I was actually abroad for work. I run a business overseas, and it's been quite hectic. It's been ages since I've had a chance to enjoy summer and sunshine. Once things settled down, I decided to come back, and believe it or not, right after I tried to find you, I ended up here with appendicitis, she explained. Despite the circumstances, her laughter lightened the mood. It's just in the early stages, so medication should do the trick. Plus, if I were still abroad, the treatment cost would have been astronomical. In a way, I'm relieved it happened here, Helen continued, her infectious optimism and familiar smile lifting my spirits. Our unexpected reunion quickly became a joyful trip down memory lane as we reminisced about the past. But as our conversation deepened, Helen, with her ever-so-kind expression, gently probed, "You don't have to share if you're uncomfortable, but I couldn't help but notice you were upset earlier. What happened?" Trusting Helen, not just as a former customer but as a true friend, I opened up about the struggles with my husband and in-laws. I'm really worried about bringing my child into such a toxic environment, fearing they'll be treated the same way I am. And now, without my job, the idea of living independently, let alone with a child, feels daunting. To my astonishment, Helen made an incredibly generous offer. I happen to have an apartment you could use. I manage a few properties as part of a project I developed on some land I inherited. It's a cozy 2-bedroom with a separate bathroom and soundproof walls, situated in a safe neighborhood close to amenities like supermarkets and a police station. There's no need for a deposit right now, and you can start paying rent whenever you're settled. It's a really good deal. What do you think? Helen's enthusiasm was palpable, and her sincere offer left me in disbelief. Are you sure you can provide it at such favorable terms? I asked, overwhelmed by her kindness. Absolutely. I trust you to take good care of the place. Plus, I believe in supporting each other in times of need. You're more than welcome to stay there, she assured me, her generosity shining brightly. Helen's unexpected kindness was a beacon of hope, not just offering me a place to stay, but the possibility of a new beginning, eager to lend a hand to someone she valued. She opened the doors of her apartment to me, an act of kindness I couldn't refuse. Gratefully, I accepted. Days later, after the doctors gave me the green light, I left the hospital and moved directly into the apartment Helen had prepared for me. She had effortlessly arranged everything over a phone call, showcasing her remarkable generosity. I didn't return to the home I shared with my husband. Instead, I embraced this new chapter in Helen's welcoming and cozy apartment. Though I couldn't shake the guilt of not paying rent immediately, Helen dismissed my concerns with a laugh, insisting everything was fine. During my husband's working hours, I stealthily returned to our shared home to gather my belongings, only to realize how little there felt truly mine. The house felt as empty as my heart did within its walls. Helen's support extended far beyond providing me with an apartment. She introduced me to a lawyer who had once helped her, which solidified my decision to pursue a divorce. The lawyer's encouragement felt like a beacon of hope, and with each hospital visit confirming the health of my growing baby, my resolve strengthened. However, during one such visit, my heart sank at the sight of my husband waiting for me outside. Panic surged through me, and although I tried to escape, my pregnant condition slowed me down. He approached me, his grip tightening on my arm as he confronted me about the lawyer and our living situation. I stood my ground, insisting that any discussions about the divorce, compensation, and child support go through my lawyer. His refusal to provide support and his demands for me to return home were met with my firm refusal as he attempted to pull me back with force. Just then, a young woman intervened. Rebecca, as she introduced herself, knew my husband and immediately stepped in front of me protectively. Their familiar exchange did little to mask the tension. Rebecca challenged my husband, George, refusing to let him take me against my will. Her determination and the implied threat of involving the police shifted the dynamics of the confrontation, providing me with a glimmer of hope and the courage to stand up for myself. When George heard the mention of the police, he appeared frightened and quickly retreated. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, rendering my legs weak. Rebecca came to my side, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay?" she asked, and I apologized, explaining how relieved I was to have her support. Without hesitation, she called a taxi for me, insisting on ensuring I got home safely. I felt guilty for the trouble, but she assured me it was no bother. When I gave Rebecca my address, she was surprised to learn that I lived just below her. It was a happy coincidence that we were neighbors, cheerful and caring. Rebecca turned out to be a new employee at George's workplace. She revealed that she had reported his inappropriate behavior, leading to his removal as her mentor. George had gained a reputation for his lack of empathy towards female employees, often making insensitive comments about personal matters like menstruation and marriage. Rebecca's words resonated with me. I knew all too well how George had treated me during my pregnancy. 3 weeks after our initial meeting, Rebecca and I had formed a close friendship, sharing dinners and confiding in one another. She updated me on George's situation, informing me that he had been transferred to a subsidiary company after a series of complaints against him. Interestingly, Rebecca was the daughter of Helen, the successful businesswoman who managed several properties, including the apartment where I was staying. George had bragged about handling Helen's account, but his inappropriate behavior led to a significant shift in his professional standing. After learning about his actions, both at work and towards me, Helen had advocated for George's transfer. Rebecca, determined and capable, had taken steps to address workplace issues independently of her mother. But once she realized I was connected to Rebecca's mother, which compelled her to take action. Encouraged by Helen, Rebecca gathered all the evidence against George, leading to his transfer. With his decreased income and increased workload, George's position had shifted dramatically. Helen, drawing from her experience, advised me not to succumb to any of George's attempts to gain sympathy. She emphasized the importance of remaining firm in my decision to divorce, and her guidance was incredibly reassuring. Once I decided to proceed with the divorce, George tried to reach out through the lawyer, expressing how difficult work had become and how much he missed me. He even apologized, begging for another chance. However, I remained resolute in my choice, bolstered by Helen's unwavering support. Ultimately, George had no option but to agree to the divorce and the terms for child support and damages, which he would be obligated to pay. As time passed, my next significant challenge emerged, dealing with my in-laws, particularly my father-in-law, who was overly enthusiastic about the prospect of having a grandson. I sensed trouble brewing, and it didn't take long for my in-laws to make their move. One day, as I was leaving, my father-in-law unexpectedly grabbed my arm. He had followed Rebecca, intending to confront her, but had spotted me instead. He demanded that I hand over the baby once it was born, insisting the child was the family's heir. I struggled to free myself, but his grip was unyielding. In that moment, a firm voice pierced through the tension. "Let her go." It was Rebecca, who swiftly executed a judo maneuver that sent my father-in-law flying. I learned then that she had mastered judo to protect herself and her mother during challenging times. She was a top-ranked judoka with national titles to her name. Rebecca confronted my father-in-law, chastising him for ignoring George's actions and meddling in my life. She defended my right to start anew, emphasizing that interference was the last thing they should attempt. The sound of sirens drew closer, revealing that Rebecca had called for help before coming to my rescue. My mother-in-law, who had been waiting quietly in a nearby car, watched as the police arrived and took both her and my father-in-law into custody. My father-in-law was arrested, and after some reflection, my mother-in-law decided to divorce him. She wanted to forge a new path for herself, free from the constraints of others, and chose to move back to the countryside. George attempted to persuade his mother to take him with her, claiming he was exhausted from work and the legal battles, but she firmly rejected him. Through the lawyer, my mother-in-law expressed her apologies and left behind some money as a gesture of goodwill. Helen explained that it's common for people to feel lost after leaving a marriage, and that the money was likely my mother-in-law's way of showing remorse and supporting my son's future. I was taken aback by her support, considering her past behavior, but I felt grateful for her attempt to make amends. After finalizing the divorce, I welcomed a healthy baby boy into the world. My mother-in-law had chosen a life of solitude in the countryside, leaving behind the chaos of life with George. Upon his release, my father-in-law returned to find that the house was gone, having been demolished by my mother-in-law before her departure. He ended up moving in with George, which only created more problems, culminating in George's resignation from his job due to his tarnished reputation. Despite all the turmoil, the child support payments arrived consistently, likely managed by Helen and the lawyer. Meanwhile, Rebecca flourished at work, earning recognition and becoming a project leader admired by her colleagues. Helen's various ventures, including women-only properties and housing for foreigners, were thriving. As for me, once my son was old enough, I planned to return to work. Helen had graciously offered me a position at a new high-end cosmetics store she was opening. Helen remained a constant source of support, showering affection on my son as if he were her own grandchild. Rebecca also made time to visit us, bringing joy and laughter into our lives. Both of these remarkable women reminded me of the strength and kindness that had helped me navigate my toughest times. Inspired by their unwavering support, I was determined to be just as strong and protective of my son, committed to building a brighter future for us both.